Week 7 of the fantasy football season, and here's the top 15 quarterbacks I'm ranking this week. The first guy, Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs. So Patrick Mahomes, I know he's been solid this season, no doubt about it, and one of the best quarterbacks in fantasy football. But so far, we haven't seen that patented 35, 40-point fantasy day. But this week here versus one of the worst pass defenses in the league, the Los Angeles Chargers. A division game, home game, shootout potential for sure this week. I think Patrick Mahomes finally has that monster game, and I got him at one. Number 2, Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles. I know Jalen Hurts last week, it was a poor performance with 3 interceptions versus the New York Jets, one of the best defenses in the league. But this week here, another potential high-scoring shootout between this Philadelphia Eagle team and the Miami Dolphins. So this game definitely could be one of the highest scoring, if not the high scoring games of the week. With that in the Chief game, like I mentioned, to Hurts, it was one down game. Him and A.J. Brown still on the same page, playing good football. Dallas Goedert, he's been back in the mix. And this week here in a game where obviously this defense of the Dolphins isn't even anywhere close to the Jets, Hurts has a good one and back on track. Number 3, Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills. So Josh Allen's been a solid quarterback and the best quarterback in terms of fantasy points so far this season in fantasy football. This week, I know he goes to the division rival, the New England Patriots, when we know he's coming off a mediocre performance versus one of the worst D's in the league in the New York Giants. But I think that had to do more with Dable knowing tendencies and what Josh Allen's thinking and doing, being the offensive coordinator for the Bills for many seasons before the Giants head coach. But anyway, Allen, I think, gets back on track. Him and Stephon Diggs have been on the same page all season. Diggs won another big game in Week 6 versus the Giants. And this week here versus New England, that's banged up with Matthew Judon and Gonzalez out for the season. I think it's another big game here for Allen. And 3, number 4, Tua of the Miami Dolphins. So Tua, he's on an MVP tear. And him and Tyreek Hill, the most dangerous quarterback-receiver combo in all the NFL here this season. So Tua, he's throwing the football great, getting at the quick release, not taking the big hits, which obviously is key after 2 major concussions last season. And this week here versus a mediocre in terms of Philadelphia Eagle team for fantasy points for quarterbacks. I think Tua once again has a big game, and each and every week he's a top 5 option. Number 5, Justin Herbert of the Los Angeles Chargers. So we know Herbert's got a broken finger on his left hand, obviously his non-throwing hand. And Herbert, he came back with a decent game after the bye week versus a good Dallas Cowboy defense, over 20 fantasy points. But this week he at the Chiefs, he knows what he's got to do to go in there and pull a victory out at Arrowhead. They're going to have to put up points early and often. I think we're going to see a lot of hurry-up offense and high-tempo offense by this Los Angeles Chargers team. And when you got a number 1 weapon like a Keenan Allen who could run all the routes, he could do it all and make plays. We saw versus the Cowboys with Allen. And I think this week we're going to see it again with Allen, and Herbert is going to get things going. Number 6, Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens. So Lamar Jackson, it's been a mixed bag of results so far this season here for Lamar. Sometimes people are saying he don't have enough weapons, and then times, in my opinion, he's just looking to run the football way too much, where he could check it down to guys like Mark Andrews or even a Rashad Bateman on an underneath slant route instead of looking for that big play and home run from Jackson. So this week here, pretty decent matchup versus the Lions. I know the Lions last week held down that Tampa Bay Buccaneer offense only to 6 points, but this offense has many weapons. Is this Baltimore Raven team, especially with Zay Flowers, the rookie, emerging. And this week here, it's a home game for Baltimore, and it's going to be a grinded out type of game, but I think Lamar has a good one, and I got him at 6. Number 7, Sam Howell of the Washington Commanders, to talk about a guy that was not on the fantasy radar at all in preseason and coming into the year. Sam Howell, he's going out there and he's putting up fantasy points each and every week with 20 or more fantasy points in 5 out of 6 games this season. So this week a good matchup at the New York Giants, a young secondary, a defense that don't really stop anyone. And this could be a potential shootout as well here in the NFC East matchup. So Terry McLaurin and Howell on the same page. Him and Logan Thomas have had some decent games so far this season. And Howell, he just has a knack of having that gunslinger mentality. And a guy who's going to take some big hits, but he's putting the ball out there and making plays. So right now I like Howell at number 7. Some people might think it's high, but like I said, the numbers don't lie. And he's top 10 in fantasy points at the position. Number 8, Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions. So Jared Goff, he's having a solid season. He got St. Brown back last week. He went over 100 yards. Him and Jameson Williams still trying to work out chemistry and get things going. We saw Williams catch a crazy acrobatic deep ball in the end zone last week. And you also got Josh Reynolds and Sam Laporta, 2 good targets as well. So right now, this offense is pretty solid over there for this Detroit Lion team. And I know David Montgomery possibly could miss this ball game. The early reports come out, but it looks like Jahmyr Gibbs could be back, and we got to see if Gibbs could break out. But anyway, I know it's a tough matchup with the Baltimore Ravens. They're stout and a solid defense, but like I said, Jared Goff has good weapons. He has a good offensive line, and he's a smart quarterback with the football, barely turning the football over in the last calendar year is Jared Goff. So right now I got him at 8. Number 9, Matthew Stafford of the Los Angeles Rams. So Matthew Stafford, he's got a lot of weapons as well. Cooper Kupp back in the mix. We saw him go for 148 receiving yards last week, a big game. Puka Nacua, rookie, taking the league by storm. Tutu Atwell is a nice deep threat. Higbee is the tight end. Kyron out of the backfield, even though we know Kyron is probably not going to play in this game, and Evans will be the starting running back. But like I said, with all those weapons and a Pittsburgh Steelers defense that gives up top 10 production to fantasy quarterbacks in terms of points this season, I think Stafford in another home game, and this Ram team starting to find their groove here a little bit. I got Stafford in 9 because he's a gunslinger. He's got good weapons, like I said, and this Steelers defense do give up big plays at times. Number 10, Kirk Cousins of the Minnesota Vikings. I know Justin Jefferson, he's out a few more weeks minimum with the hamstring injury. And Kirk Cousins, he didn't have that good of a game at the Chicago Bears, but they grinded out that game. They got the victory. And this week here, they know they're going to have to throw the football a whole lot versus a good San Francisco 49er defense that pretty much shuts down the run for the most part, even though I know Jerome Ford looked pretty decent in last week's game. But last week was just a throw-out game, I believe, for this Niner team. So right now, if they want to win this game as Minnesota on Monday Night Football, they're going to have to put points on the board, and they got to put it on early and often. So right now, you still got good weapons. Jordan Addison. You got KJ Osborne, who's a good wide receiver, I believe. TJ Hawkinson, one of the better tight ends in the league here. And I think they're going to shut the run down, and Cousins is going to have to throw the ball 35, 40 times. And that volume alone should get him top 10 production. Number 11, Brock Purdy, staying in the same game of the San Francisco 49ers. So Purdy, one of the worst games, if not the worst game of his NFL career last week. But hey, they still had a chance to win the game, but missed field goals lost them the game as well for San Francisco. I know Christian McCaffrey there hopefully could play in this game as Shanahan and the San Francisco 49er team, but we'll see if he plays or not. He still has the extra day, obviously, going into Monday night. And Deebo Samuel as well was a question mark as well. But right now, you still got Kittle, still got Brandon Ayuk. And if McCaffrey isn't playing in this game, Jordan Madison, I think, can make some plays as well. So right now, I know he's coming off a bad game as Brock Purdy, but with a good matchup, not having to deal with weather elements, and I think he'll bounce back in Minnesota. I got him at number 11. Number 12, Russell Wilson of the Denver Broncos. So Russell Wilson, I know last week it was a horrible game, only 9 fantasy points for Russell Wilson, but he's at 18 or more fantasy points in every other game this season. So this week here, pretty decent matchup versus the Green Bay Packers coming to town in Denver. They're a young team. I know they're well rested coming off the bye week, but I think Russell Wilson once again could have a decent game. He has Greg Dulcich back in the lineup, even though I'm not recommending to start him right away out of the gate here after he returned last week. You got Cortland Sutton, who found the end zone in that game. Him and Wilson have a decent rapport this season. And Jerry Jeudy hasn't been on the same page with Wilson, but he's making plays with his legs. And the running backs and Jaleel McLaughlin and Pirine are making plays out of the backfield receiving. So I think Wilson will be all right this week. And like I said, only one bad game really. The rest 18 or more fantasy points this season. Number 13 staying in the same game again, Jordan Love of the Green Bay Packers. I love the first 3 weeks of the season was putting up monster fantasy points. Then week 4 versus Detroit, it took him to have a monster second half just to get to 19 fantasy points. And then week 5, it was a train wreck at the Vegas Raiders where he was getting nothing going and he was just throwing that football up for grabs. But this week here, it's a good matchup with the Denver Broncos where I think they could exploit that secondary. Christian Watson should be close to 100% now with another week to rest the hamstring. And you get Aaron Jones most likely back in the mix as well. He's one of the better receiving running backs out of the backfield as well. So right now with all those factors in a decent matchup, I'm still pumping the brakes here on Jordan Love, but I do have him at 13. Number 14, Derek Carr of the New Orleans Saints. And Derek Carr, he's been up and down so far in the first 6 games of his career with the Saints team. But this week here, a good matchup. Thursday Night Football, usually a shootout. It's a home game as well indoors, which is always a plus, obviously. And he's got good weapons. Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, he stayed healthy so far. Rashid Shaheed being a nice deep ball threat for the Saints team. And Kamara could catch the ball out of the backfield. And like I said, this Jaguar defense is pretty decent so far this season, but I still think Carr could put up points. And with 6 teams on bye, I think he cracks top 15 and 14 and the 15th and final quarterback I'm ranking Trevor Lawrence of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So right now, we don't know if Lawrence is going to play 100%. It's pretty much going to come down to the wire, I would think, here. But Trevor Lawrence this season, he's really struggled for the most part. A quarterback who's taken 6th, 7th round in most fantasy leagues. He's only had over 20 fantasy points once this season. So this week here at the New Orleans Saints, they're a pretty stout defense. They've shut down quarterbacks for the most part in terms of putting up fantasy points. Pretty much 17 points a game quarterbacks have averaged versus Saint defense. And that's all what Lawrence has pretty been doing, 17, 19 range for the most part. So right now, if he does play and not 100% anyway with the knee injury, he just cracks the top 15 because of the bye week. So that's the top 15 quarterbacks I'm ranking for week 7 of the fantasy football season.